Take a look at the food in your pantry. The brightly colored cereal your kids love, the loaf of bread that stays soft for a week, the perfectly convenient frozen snacks. They are symbols of modern life, of abundance and convenience. But what if I told you that hidden within these everyday items are ingredients that entire nations, even entire continents, have deemed unsafe for their citizens? What if the secret to that bread's perfect texture is a chemical linked to cancer in lab animals? A chemical that is illegal to add to flour in Europe, in China, in Brazil, but sits right now on your kitchen counter? This isn't a story about panic. It's not about good food versus bad food. It's a journey into a hidden world of rules, regulations, and risk. A world where two identical-looking products on opposite sides of the Atlantic can have vastly different formulas. Why is an ingredient considered perfectly safe in one country, yet banned in another? The answers will change the way you walk down a grocery aisle forever. Let's begin with a color. A vibrant, synthetic, almost cartoonish yellow. It's the color of sunshine in a box of mac and cheese, the cheerful glow of a banana-flavored candy, the golden hue of a fizzy soft drink. This is the world of tartrazine, also known as yellow number 5, and its close cousin, sunset yellow, or yellow number 6. In the United States, they are everywhere. They are two of the most widely used food dyes on the planet, approved by the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, as safe for consumption. They are the artist's pigments for the food industry, allowing for consistent, eye-catching products that won't fade under harsh supermarket lights. After all, we eat with our eyes first. A dull beige cheese powder just doesn't have the same appeal as a pot of brilliant, glowing orange. The industry argues that these colors are essential for making food appealing, for restoring color loss during processing, and for ensuring the uniformity that consumers have come to expect. But travel across the ocean to the European Union, and the story of these colors changes dramatically. It started with a groundbreaking and fiercely debated study published in 2007 by researchers at the University of Southampton. The study suggested a link between a cocktail of specific artificial food dyes, including yellow number 5 and yellow number 6, and increased hyperactivity in children. The results sent shockwaves through the food regulation world. The European Food Safety Authority, or EFSA, reviewed the evidence. While they concluded it wasn't definitive enough to warrant an outright ban, they couldn't ignore it either. This is where a fundamental difference in philosophy becomes clear. The EU often operates on something called the precautionary principle. In simple terms, if there is a plausible risk of harm, even without absolute scientific certainty, it's better to err on the side of caution. So, they took action. Since 2010, any food in the EU containing one of the Southampton 6 dyes, which includes our familiar yellow friends, must carry a stark warning label. May have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. Think about that. A warning label, like one you'd see on a pack of cigarettes, placed directly on a bag of candy or a bottle of soda. Faced with this, what did food manufacturers do? They didn't want to put a scary warning label on products marketed to kids, so they did something remarkable. They reformulated. They found natural alternatives: paprika, beta-carotene from carrots, annatto from a tree seed. If you buy that same box of mac and cheese in the United Kingdom, its color comes from plants, not from a petroleum-based chemical. The product still looks appealing, it still tastes the same, but the controversial ingredient is gone. Meanwhile, in the United States, the FDA's position is different. They reviewed the Southampton study and other data and concluded that there was not sufficient evidence to prove a causal link between the dyes and behavioral problems in the general population of children. Their philosophy is less precautionary. It requires more definitive proof of harm before taking regulatory action. So two powerful regulatory bodies, looking at the same science, came to two different conclusions, and the result is a tale of two cheese powders, one colored by carrots, the other by a chemical that requires a warning label in another hemisphere. The same is true for red number 40, a dye that gives strawberry-flavored snacks and cherry sodas their ruby blush. Banned in several European nations, it remains one of the most popular colorants in the US. So the question becomes, which approach is right? The one that demands near certainty before acting, or the one that takes precautions in the face of uncertainty? From the color that deceives the eye, we move to the texture that delights the mouth. Imagine the perfect loaf of store-bought bread. It's incredibly soft, with a fine, uniform crumb, and a beautifully browned, resilient crust. It feels strong, yet yielding. For decades, one of the secrets to achieving this commercial-grade perfection was an unassuming white powder called potassium bromate. When added to flour, it acts as a powerful oxidizing agent, a dough conditioner. It strengthens the gluten network in the dough, allowing it to rise higher during baking and trapping more gas. This results in that fluffy, voluminous texture that mass-market bakeries strive for. It makes the dough easier to handle for machines and produces a finished product that is visually perfect every single time. For a time, it was a baker's miracle ingredient. But a dark cloud was gathering over this miracle powder. During the baking process, the potassium bromate is supposed to convert into a harmless substance, potassium bromide. However, studies began to show that if the bread isn't baked for long enough, at a high enough temperature, or if too much of the additive is used, residual amounts of potassium bromate can remain in the final product. And that's a problem. A big one. In 1999, the International Agency for Research on Cancer, part of the World Health Organization, classified potassium bromate as a Group 2B carcinogen. That means it is possibly carcinogenic to humans. The evidence was based on studies showing it caused kidney, thyroid, and other cancers in lab animals. The world reacted swiftly. The European Union banned it. The United Kingdom had already banned it a decade earlier. Canada, Brazil, Argentina, Nigeria, China, South Korea. The list of countries that prohibited its use in food grew and grew. They looked at the evidence and, again applying the precautionary principle, decided that the risk of a potential carcinogen in a staple food like bread was simply not worth the benefit of a slightly fluffier texture. Better to have slightly less perfect bread than to have a potential cancer risk, no matter how small. Yet in the United States, potassium bromate remains legal at the federal level. The FDA's logic hinges on that conversion during baking. Their official position is that when used properly, the levels remaining in finished bread are negligible, typically below 20 parts per billion, and therefore pose no significant risk. They regulate the amount that can be used, but they have not instituted a ban. This has left the decision up to individual states and consumers. California, for its part, requires a cancer warning label on any product containing it under its Proposition 65 law. As a result, many American bakers and food companies have voluntarily stopped using it, bowing to consumer pressure and the desire to have a clean label, but there is no federal law stopping them. It's a striking example of a global consensus being met with regulatory inertia, leaving consumers to navigate the ingredient lists on their own. The perfect loaf of bread, it turns in, comes with a hidden controversy baked right in. And potassium bromate has a close cousin in controversy, azotocarbonamide. This is the ingredient that famously became known as the yoga mat chemical, after a popular food blogger pointed out it was used to make both bread and foamed plastics, like yoga mats and shoe soles. The outcry was immense. In bread, it functions similarly to potassium bromate, as a dough conditioner and flour bleaching agent, and just like bromate, when it's baked, it's supposed to break down. However, one of the substances it breaks down into is semicarbazide, a chemical that has been shown to cause lung and blood vessel damage in mice. Another breakdown product, urethane, is a recognized carcinogen. On this basis, the European Union has completely banned its use in food. Singapore has too. In the United States, it is generally recognized as safe by the FDA, as long as it's used within specified limits. The public backlash was so strong that many major chains, like Subway, publicly pledged to remove it from their bread. But again, the federal regulation stands in stark contrast to much of the rest of the world. The quest for perfect texture reveals a chasm in how different governments define the word safe. Now let's move from texture and color to time itself. The eternal enemy of food is decay. The battle for a longer shelf life is fought on a microscopic level, with chemical soldiers called preservatives. Two of the most common are butylated hydroxyanisole, or BHA, and butylated hydroxytoluene, or BHT. You will find them in an astonishing array of products: breakfast cereals, potato chips, chewing gum, vegetable oils, processed meats, and butter. Their job is to be antioxidants. They prevent the fats and oils in these foods from going rancid, from oxidizing when exposed to air. They keep your chips crispy and your cereal from tasting stale for months on end. They are, from an industrial perspective, incredibly effective and cheap. But the questions about their safety have persisted for decades. The science is complex and often appears contradictory. The U.S. National Toxicology Program has classified BHA as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen, based on evidence from animal studies showing it can cause stomach tumors in rats and hamsters. Other studies, however, have suggested that BHA might even have anti-cancer properties in certain circumstances. BHT is similarly mired in debate, with some research linking it to an increased risk of cancer and other studies suggesting it may be protective. Both have also been flagged as potential endocrine disruptors, meaning they could interfere with the body's delicate hormonal systems. Faced with this murky scientific picture, regulators have once again diverged. The European Union, following its precautionary principle, has taken a much stricter approach. While BHT is allowed in some specific circumstances, the use of BHA is severely restricted and is currently being phased out of many food categories as EFSA re-evaluates its safety. They view the evidence of potential harm as sufficient reason to limit exposure. Japan and the United Kingdom also have tight restrictions or outright bans. Meanwhile, the US FDA continues to permit both BHA and BHT, classifying them as generally recognized as safe. The FDA's stance is that the levels consumed in a typical diet are far below the levels that caused harm in animal studies, and therefore they do not pose a significant risk to human health. So, when you pick up a box of cereal, you are holding an artifact of this fundamental disagreement. Is it okay to consume a low level of something that's reasonably anticipated to be a carcinogen, or should such ingredients be avoided entirely in favor of safer, if perhaps more expensive, alternatives like vitamin E or rosemary extract? The story doesn't end in the factory. It begins long before, on the farm. Let's talk about the meat we eat. In the highly competitive world of modern agriculture, efficiency is king. Faster growth, leaner animals, and higher profits are the goals. One tool used to achieve this in some countries is a drug called ractopamine. It's not a steroid or a hormone. It's a beta agonist, a type of drug that, when fed to pigs and cattle in the final weeks before slaughter, redirects nutrients to produce more lean muscle instead of fat. The result is a heavier, leaner animal, produced with less feed. By some estimates, it can increase the weight of a pig by as much as 10 pounds. For the meat industry, it's a significant economic boon. In the United States, Canada, and a couple of dozen other countries, ractopamine is legal. The FDA approved it after concluding that the meat produced from treated animals is safe for human consumption, as long as a withdrawal period is observed to ensure residue levels are low. But this is where the American dinner plate becomes an island. Ractopamine is completely banned for use in livestock in at least 160 other countries, including the entire European Union, Russia, and crucially, China. Why such a sweeping global rejection? The reasons are twofold. First, there are concerns about animal welfare. The drug can cause significant stress on animals, leading to hyperactivity, increased heart rates, and a higher incidence of broken limbs and downer animals who are too sick or injured to stand. Many nations have decided that these animal welfare costs are unacceptable. Second, there are lingering questions about its effects on humans. While regulators in the US found it safe, others were not convinced. The European Food Safety Authority reviewed the data and concluded that there was not enough information to establish a safe maximum residue level for human consumption. They pointed to potential cardiovascular effects in humans and a lack of data on long-term exposure. As a result, they banned not only the use of the drug but also the importation of any meat from animals that have been treated with it. This has become a major point of contention in international trade deals. A pork chop that is a standard, unremarkable product in an American supermarket is considered illicit contraband in a European one, barred at the border, not just because of how it was raised, but because of the drug that might invisibly linger in its tissues. This same farm-to-fork divide is starkly illustrated by the case of chlorinated chicken. In the United States, it's common practice for poultry processing plants to use antimicrobial rinses, including chlorine washes, as a final step to kill harmful bacteria like Salmonella and Campylobacter on the surface of the chicken carcasses. From the perspective of the U.S. food safety system, this is a highly effective pathogen reduction treatment, a critical safety step to protect consumers from foodborne illness. The USDA maintains it is perfectly safe, and that any residual chlorine is at levels far too low to cause harm. But in the European Union, chlorine-washed chicken is banned from being imported. This ban isn't actually about the chlorine itself. European regulators agree that the chemical wash is not harmful to consumers. Instead, the ban is about philosophy. The EU's farm-to-fork strategy emphasizes hygiene and safety at every single step of the process. The conditions on the farm, the cleanliness of the transport, and the standards within the slaughterhouse. They argue that relying on a chemical wash at the end of the line could allow for lower hygiene standards throughout the rest of the process. They see it as a crutch, a way to clean up a dirty product, rather than ensuring the product is kept clean from the very beginning. The ban, therefore, is symbolic. It's a statement about how food should be produced. So while an American sees a final, effective safety measure, a European sees a potential shortcut that papers over problems further up the supply chain. Two systems, both aiming for safe food, but with fundamentally different ideas about how to get there. Perhaps no story better illustrates the collision of food science, corporate ambition, and unintended consequences than the saga of Olestra. In the 1990s, it was hailed as a miracle, a fat substitute invented by Procter & Gamble and marketed under the brand name Olean, that had 0 calories. The science was ingenious. Olestra is a molecule made from sucrose and vegetable oil, but it's too large and has a different shape than regular fat, so the human body's digestive enzymes can't break it down. It passes through the system completely undigested. The dream was born. Now you could eat potato chips, crackers, and all sorts of snacks without absorbing any of the fat or calories. It was the holy grail of junk food. The FDA approved it in 1996 for use in salty snacks, and the Wow chips hit the market with a massive promotional campaign. But there was a problem. A very unpleasant one. Because Olestra is a fat-like substance that goes through the body undigested, it could have a powerful laxative effect. The side effects listed in small print included abdominal cramping, loose stools, and anal leakage. Yes, anal leakage. It also had another critical side effect. It would bind with fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and carry them right out of the body, potentially leading to vitamin deficiencies. The FDA required products made with Olestra to carry a warning label explicitly stating these potential effects. This product contains Olestra. Olestra may cause abdominal cramping and loose stools. Olestra inhibits the absorption of some vitamins and other nutrients. Despite the warning, people were captivated by the promise of guilt-free chips. But soon the reports started rolling in. The side effects were real, and they were unpleasant. The product became a late-night punchline. Meanwhile, countries like the United Kingdom and Canada looked at the evidence and simply said no. They refused to approve Olestra, deeming the side effects and the nutrient depletion issues unacceptable for a mass-market food ingredient. The risk, they decided, far outweighed the reward of a lower-calorie potato chip. Eventually, even in the US, the novelty wore off, and the public backlash grew. The warning label was eventually removed in 2003 after the manufacturer provided more data, but the damage was done. Olestra never recovered. It stands today as a cautionary tale of a scientific marvel that failed to account for basic human biology, and a stark example of how different regulators can look at the same product and see either a qualified innovation or an unacceptable public health risk. Finally, let's pour a glass of milk. In the 1990s, another scientific innovation promised to revolutionize an industry. Recombinant bovine growth hormone, or RBGH, also known as RBST. It's a synthetic, genetically engineered version of a natural hormone that cows produce. When injected into dairy cows, it can increase their milk production by 10 to 15%. For the dairy industry, this was a massive leap in efficiency. More milk from the same number of cows meant lower costs and higher profits. Monsanto, the company that developed it, spent years and millions of dollars to get it approved. In 1993, the FDA gave it the green light, concluding that milk from treated cows was safe to drink and indistinguishable from milk from untreated cows. The backlash was immediate and fierce. Consumer groups, small farmers, and animal welfare advocates raised a storm of protest. They raised two main concerns. First, the health of the cows. Studies showed that cows treated with RBGH had a significantly higher incidence of mastitis, a painful udder infection, which in turn required more antibiotic use. This raised broader concerns about antibiotic resistance. Second, there were fears about human health. While the FDA was confident it was safe, critics pointed to an increase in a compound called IGF-1 in the milk, and they worried about potential links to cancer, though this link has never been definitively proven. Once again, the world divided. Canada reviewed the evidence and refused to approve RBGH, citing the negative impacts on animal health as a primary reason. The European Union followed suit, instituting a complete ban. Japan, Australia, New Zealand all rejected the hormone. They decided that the economic benefits did not justify the risks to animal welfare and the lingering questions about human health. But in the US, it was legal. What followed was not a regulatory battle, but a market battle. Consumers began demanding milk from cows not treated with the artificial hormone. A powerful labeling movement emerged. Dairies and brands that didn't use RBGH began proudly advertising that fact on their cartons. RBGH free. From cows not treated with RBST. The labels became a powerful marketing tool. The consumer, armed with information and a choice, began to vote with their dollars. Over time, the use of RBGH has plummeted in the United States, not because the law changed, but because the market rejected it. Major retailers and dairy processors, from Walmart to Dannon to Starbucks, demanded RBGH-free milk from their suppliers. It's a fascinating case where consumer demand achieved what international regulatory pressure could not. So what do we make of all this? The world of food is not as simple as we think. The contents of our shopping carts are the result of 1,000 hidden decisions, of scientific debates, political lobbying, cultural norms, and profoundly different philosophies about risk. The European precautionary principle often stands in stark contrast to the American demand for more definitive proof of harm. One is not inherently better than the other. They are simply different ways of balancing innovation, commerce, and public safety. This journey isn't meant to make you fear your food. It's meant to empower you. It's a reminder that we are not passive consumers. The simple act of turning over a package and reading the ingredients is an act of awareness. Understanding that the rules are different everywhere encourages us to ask questions. Why is this ingredient here? Is there an alternative? What do I, as an individual, feel comfortable with? The fact that a product in one country can be successfully made without these controversial additives proves that it is possible. The ultimate power doesn't just lie with the regulators in Washington or Brussels. It lies with us, in the aisles of the grocery store, every single day. The choice, once you know it exists, is yours. What surprised you the most about the food you thought you knew? Let us know in the comments below. And if you believe knowledge is the most important ingredient of all, consider subscribing for more deep dives into the world around us.